There are moments in life when everything familiar suddenly feels distant. Laughter no longer brings joy. The crowd no longer gives a sense of belonging, and even one's own reflection becomes unrecognizable in the mirror of yesterday. A hollow space opens up, not in the world outside, but within the heart. And in that very space, something begins to awaken. It is not rebellion, nor is it an escape. It is the quiet calling of the soul, inviting us to step away from our roles, away from the noise of the world, and return to the bare yet pure truth. Along that path we lose many things: old relationships, the images we once believed were ourselves, even the safety of being understood and loved. Yet within that loss, something else blossoms, a peace that no longer depends on anyone, that needs no validation to exist. This journey is not for those who seek comfort, but for those who dare to face themselves. It is the path from noise to silence, from pretending to honesty, from searching to being. And when we reach the end of that road, we realize we were never leaving the world. We were returning to life itself, simple, genuine, and utterly free. When a man begins to awaken, the world around him seems to slow down. The familiar sounds of life, laughter, arguments, complaints, praise, still echo as before, but he is no longer drawn into them. He watches them as if they were scenes in a play, and suddenly realizes he no longer wishes to play any role in it. Not because he despises others, nor because he believes himself superior, but because he begins to see things as they are, and once seen, they cannot be unseen. He realizes that most conversations around him are not truly communication. They are rituals repeated out of habit, greetings, stories about work, about who bought what, about what others said. Behind these exchanges, there is no presence, no true listening, only the compulsion to fill the void. People speak not to share, but to avoid silence. They connect not to understand, but to reassure themselves that they still exist in the eyes of others. He used to be like that too. He once felt that belonging to a group meant connection, that closeness was proof of friendship, that agreement was a sign of love. But as he began to awaken, those beliefs shattered. He saw that many relationships were held together by the fear of being abandoned. People talk so they won't be forgotten, laugh so they won't seem cold, agree so they won't be excluded. Such closeness is not a meeting of souls, but a silent negotiation to keep pretending. Since that realization, he began to withdraw naturally. He did not declare his departure, did not shut doors, did not grow angry. He simply stopped participating in conversations that were no longer true. He no longer tried to impress, nor sought to be liked. When someone asked if he was doing well, he smiled, knowing deep down there was nothing left to prove. The distance between him and the world was not a wall, but a space needed to breathe, to listen to himself. To others, he might seem changed, more distant, quieter, colder. But in truth, he had only stopped pretending. He no longer wanted to say what he didn't believe, nor engage in debates merely to assert his ego. He still cared, he still loved, but his love was no longer attachment. It became a gentle observation, a compassion that required no display. That moment marked the first step toward freedom. He began to realize that standing alone was not as frightening as he once thought. For in that silence he could hear what the noise had long concealed, the true voice of his own being. And so even while living among others, he had begun to walk a different path, the path of awakening, where distance is no longer a barrier, but a doorway to truth. As he stepped away from the whirlpools of social life, a sense of emptiness rushed in. No more gatherings, no more lively messages, no one waiting for his laughter to join the conversation. At first, it unsettled him. He thought he was lonely. For since childhood, he had been taught that being alone is a sign of lack, that silence is a mark of sadness. But when he stayed long enough within that stillness, he realized it was not loneliness, but an open space inviting him to return to himself. He began to see that the noise people create is not because they have something to say, but because they fear silence. Silence forces them to face themselves, to confront their fears, their emptiness, the spaces they've long avoided with work, entertainment, or endless chatter. They do not know how to sit still. They do not know how to hear their own breath. But he, after the first days of resistance, gradually learned to sit quietly, doing nothing, simply feeling life unfolding. When he allowed silence to surround him, he discovered something strange. It was not empty at all. On the contrary, it was full of awareness, full of presence, full of things he had never noticed before. The sound of the wind was no longer just a sound. It was a reminder that life is always in motion, even when humans are still. The light filtering through the leaves was no longer just scenery. It was proof that everything is constantly changing, whether he acts or not. In silence, the world still sings. It's just that he had never been quiet enough to hear. Bit by bit, he began to harmonize with silence. Instead of seeking to escape it, he began to love it, as he loved his own breath. He no longer rushed to fill every moment with activity or conversation. He no longer reached for his phone just to escape the feeling of having nothing to do. In that emptiness, he discovered something profound. Fulfillment does not lie in having more, but in having less. Less need, less expectation, less noise. To outsiders, he still appeared lonely. But they did not understand that solitude and loneliness are not the same. Loneliness is when one needs someone who is not there. Solitude is when one needs no one, yet feels completely whole. That difference can only be understood by those who dare to remain in silence long enough to see that they were never as lacking as they once believed. Gradually, he no longer feared emptiness. He stopped trying to fill each moment with busyness. Silence no longer pressed upon him. It became a loyal companion, ever present, gentle, without judgment or demand. In that stillness, he saw himself clearly, no roles, no masks, no pretense. Only a pure peace remained, like a still lake reflecting the sky. Then he understood. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the absence of chaos. And within that space, he was no longer lonely. He was simply present, whole, free, and true. When a person becomes acquainted with silence, another profound thing begins to appear. He can no longer lie to himself. With no one left to please, no one to impress, the layers of disguise he once wore began to fall away. In that silence, every word, every action, every thought revealed itself in complete clarity. He saw the moments when he forced a smile to be accepted, when he agreed to be liked, when he feigned optimism to hide fear. He realized that much of his life had not been lived, but performed, an act of playing the most forgivable version of himself. And once he saw that, he could no longer go back. Honesty began to take root, not the harsh kind that seeks to prove something, but a quiet sincerity born from having nothing left to hide. He no longer spoke untrue words just to keep the peace, no longer smiled when his heart was weary, no longer pretended to care just to avoid the discomfort of distance. Instead of trying to fit in, he chose to be genuine, which means no longer betraying his own feelings to please others. At first, this change confused people. They were used to a man who was always agreeable, always accommodating, always making everyone feel comfortable. Now he seemed unpredictable, distant, even cold. But he did not resent them, for he understood. They never truly saw him. They only saw the reflection of their own expectations in him. When that mirror stopped showing what they wanted to see, they called him a stranger. But for him, it was the first time he had ever been truly close to himself. That honesty brought forth a deep kind of freedom. He no longer had to remember what he said yesterday to maintain an image. He no longer cared what others thought when he was silent. He no longer weighed every word to keep everyone pleased. He was allowed to be himself, without proof, without explanation. Each moment grew lighter, for he no longer carried the burden of pretending. The freedom that people search for, through power, wealth, or fame, turns out to be nothing more than the freedom to be honest without fear of losing anything. He began to understand that honesty is the foundation of peace. For when he faced the truth, however uncomfortable, he no longer needed to run. And when there was no longer a need to run, nothing could chase him. Instead of trying to control how others saw him, he simply lived in a way that did not betray himself. This was not selfishness, but a quiet form of humility, the acceptance that one cannot be anything other than one's own true nature. Inner freedom does not come from being forgiven or being loved, but from no longer needing those things to feel whole. He stopped trying to prove his worth through the eyes of others, stopped seeking validation in praise or affection. In that space he became light, as though the wind could pass through him without leaving a trace. And then he understood. True freedom does not lie in where one goes or what one does, but in the ability to live honestly with oneself, even if it means the world no longer understands you. When a man becomes truthful with himself, the first thing he loses is not possessions or status, but relationships built upon illusion. No conflict is needed, no farewell spoken. They simply dissolve like mist in the morning sun. For the ties that once bound him to others were not born of love or understanding, but of shared pretense. When he stopped pretending, those ties had no reason to remain. At first, that realization saddened him. He had once believed that friendship was eternal, that genuine affection could never fade. But now he saw clearly, most human attachment is not born of understanding, but of shared fear of loneliness. People meet to complain about the same things, to reinforce the same beliefs, to shield one another from the emptiness within. When he no longer joined those conversations, they felt lost, not because he had done anything wrong, but because he no longer helped sustain their illusions. Gradually, conversations became fewer. Invitations came less often. Some said he had changed, others thought him arrogant, some simply grew silent and drifted away. But he understood there was nothing to hold on to. Every relationship lasts only as long as both people need each other to sustain an old story. When the story ends, the relationship ends. It is not a loss, but a return to essence. He saw that most closeness in life is an unspoken pact between fears. I will not touch your wound if you don't touch mine. I will agree with you, even insincerely, as long as you agree with me. Everything runs smoothly, until one of them awakens and asks, why must we keep pretending? And that is when silence falls, heavy but true. Then he began to understand the value of true friendship. It is not loud, not dependent, not performative. It is rare, but when it exists, it flows as naturally as breath. Two people need not agree on everything, nor speak every day. They simply recognize each other in stillness, like two candles burning side by side, neither taking light from the other. Such friendship does not seek comfort, but brings serenity. There is no need to share everything, only to be together without roles. Connections like that cannot be sought or built through effort. They appear only when both have ceased using each other to fill their own emptiness. And because of that, they are as rare as falling stars. Yet when they appear, he realizes all the relationships that faded before had to fade to make room for something real. In the end, he learned that others' departure is not a sign of failure, but a natural phase of awakening. When one stops acting, those who loved the role will no longer recognize the person. But that is all right, for he no longer needs to be recognized. He only needs to be true, and in this world, that alone is already a profound form of love. When the masks dissolve, when shallow connections fall away, he stands alone, not in tragedy, but in complete stillness. At first, the quiet feels strange. No more noise, no more empty talk, no more eyes seeking agreement. But slowly, he realizes this is not emptiness, but a new kind of fullness, a completeness that needs nothing beyond itself. He no longer feels the need to be understood. He no longer wishes to explain why he has changed, why he lives differently. For he has seen that misunderstanding is born from the desire to be accepted. When that desire fades, so does misunderstanding. He no longer tries to be seen as a good man, a deep soul, or an awakened one. He simply is, without label, without goal, without the need to prove anything. Within the quiet space of his own being, he finds a peace that the world can neither give nor take away. That peace is not the result of effort, but the consequence of letting go. When he no longer clings to reputation, role, or approval, everything becomes light as clouds. He can live among people, yet not be carried away by them. He can still love, laugh, and speak, but with no hidden need behind any of it. Love is no longer demand, it becomes pure presence, to love simply because one loves, not to be loved in return. Others may think he has withdrawn from the world, but in truth, he is in the world more than ever. For only when freed from roles can one truly be present in every moment. When he drinks a cup of tea, he truly drinks it, feeling its warmth and fragrance without needing to think of anything else. When he walks, he truly walks, not to arrive anywhere, not to achieve anything. Each action becomes meditation, each breath a reminder that life has never existed anywhere but here, in this moment. He no longer searches for the meaning of life, for he understands that the search itself is what keeps people from life. Life does not need to be understood, it only needs to be lived completely. And in that wholeness he sees, there is nothing to attain, no truth to hold on to, only the silence breathing through him, the presence aware of itself. As the world continues to rush forward, he stands still within his own heart, neither resisting nor clinging. He watches people chase after fame, argue to defend their opinions, cling desperately to what is already changing. But he no longer judges. He understands. Everyone is walking their own path and no one can awaken for another. In the end, he no longer needs the world to awaken with him to feel complete. He no longer needs agreement to feel clarity. He no longer needs love to know that he is enough. He walks through life, alone, yet not lonely, like one who has made peace with the cost of truth. And one day we too will stop searching for what lies outside. No longer chasing praise or fearing the gaze of others. We will sit quietly amid life, listening to the wind through the leaves, feeling our hearts beat slowly and realize everything we ever sought was always right here. Truth does not hide on distant peaks, nor in thick books. It lives in the moment we dare to be silent, to release, to look directly at ourselves without fear. Then, without any prayer, we are already blessed. Without any refuge, we already rest within existence itself. The awakened one is not higher than others, not separate from the world. They simply live without pretending, love without demanding, and are present without needing to be seen. And perhaps that is the deepest form of freedom. To be nothing, to need nothing, yet to be everything.